What up YouTube? Welcome back to Not Your Father's Finance. Abby here, and today we are doing our very first book review, which I'm pretty excited about. You might be thinking it's kind of weird for this channel to be doing book reviews, but I decided that I really like reading self-help and psychology books, and honestly they just help my overall well-being and all aspects of life, and that includes finance, and so why would I not talk about that on this channel? Today we're going to review the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. But before we go into this, because this is the very first book review, I just want to say I want to share the love. I want to give a book review, and then if this book is something you want to read or inspires you or whatever the case is, I want to mail it to you. I clearly only have one copy, but my hope and my goal is that I would mail it to somebody, and then when they're done, they can look back on the YouTube channel and mail it to somebody else, and we kind of start this chain of mailing a book around. So I put my name at the very top and the date. This page isn't white, it has a bunch of stuff on it, but I'm just gonna write right over top of it. So that's my country coming out. Anyway, that is what I hope to do with these book reviews. I don't know why this country accent's coming out, really sorry about that. Or enjoy, I guess. Anyway, back to the review. That is what we're doing. So, welcome. Glad you could join me. Okay, let's get into the book review. Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. Overall, I thought it was a really good book. I would recommend. My favorite part was part 1 when it talks about opportunity. Outliers aren't born with it. They're not born these like crazy people that are just born to be successful. It's all about opportunity, what opportunities they got in their lives, the special circumstances that they were born into, the time of year they were born, maybe the year itself they were born. It is about all these things, their culture, their ancestors. It's all these things coming together to make this person unique and make them have unique characteristics, that they were at the right place at the right time and they put in the work, and that is why they are an outlier. And I just found that really interesting. So we're just gonna jump into some of the examples that really stuck out to me, that I really liked, and that I think will be helpful even if you don't read the book and kind of out of context, I guess. The first chapter is about essentially when you're born. So sometimes people are just born at the right time. Canadian pro hockey players are most likely born in January, February, March, and April, so the beginning of the year. And the reason why is the cutoff for Canadian hockey when you're a child starts January 1st. And so anybody born after that is in this new, league or new year. And anybody born in December is obviously a year behind, essentially a year behind the people born in January. So the kids born in January, they have a year of development over these other kids. And when you're young, a year of development is so huge. And then when scouts look at them, they see they're a little bit more developed, a little bit better. And so they get into the better leagues as they get older. The better leagues as you get older play more games, they have more practice hours, and they play other better teams. And the people that don't get into the better leagues, they have a little few less hours of practice, they have not as many games, and essentially how that works out over their lifetime is that they just won't be as good at the end of the day. And so that is why most pro hockey players are born in January, February, March, April, at least in Canada. It does matter when you are born how successful you be in the endeavor you choose. The next chapter is about 10,000 hours of work, which I think was my favorite chapter in the entire book. Any expert has put in 10,000 hours of work, and that is consistent over many fields. Anything you can imagine, once you've put in 10,000 hours of work, you are an expert at it. And before then, before you hit those 10,000 hours, you're okay, you're good, but you're not that good. And as soon as you hit that, you just hit this expert level and your skills explode. The Beatles, they had to go play in Germany at like strip clubs and things like that. And it was tireless hours. They worked like almost 8 hours a day, if not more, and they worked there for playing sets. What it added up to be over 200 some days by the end of a couple years. And they just got hours and hours and hours of practice, and they were playing their own songs. They learned stage presence. They learned how to get the crowd engaged. They learned how to play good cover songs. They learned what interests people. They learned what people didn't like. And essentially, because they spent these 2 years in Germany playing to people that didn't care, playing to people that didn't know who they were, that just walked by for hours and hours and hours, they became who they are today and known worldwide. Once they started touring the US, they had just the most amazing stage presence, and they just knew how to play their instruments without fault, and they just created insane music, and that is thanks to the 10,000 hours they had put in prior. A big thing to that was all the time they spent in Germany just practicing tirelessly. Bill Gates happened to be born, I think in 1955, which happened to be like basically the breakthrough if you were gonna like explode in technology. Steve Jobs was born 1955, 56-ish. So one, they were all born around the same year, which is interesting. But two, Bill Gates just had a lot of opportunity growing up that not the average kid had. His high school had real-time programming that was like unheard of. It was like one of the first computers that had that. And so it was insane that he had it as a high school student, and his mom had connections. So once he started getting pretty good at programming, he actually was programming around the area with some friends, and then they used to go work for some businesses and help them out doing it, and they just loved it. It was their passion. In high school, he had all this programming experience, and so by the time he went to college, he was way ahead of the game, and then he dropped out and made Microsoft. We know the story from there, but the point of the story is that he was born in the right year. He had these opportunities that his school had, that his mom had, the connections they had, and it all led him to have these opportunities to practice and hone his skill. And then that's when he birthed Microsoft. And so, again, it's just not like Bill Gates was born and he was destined to be who he is. He put in the work, he was born in the right year, he had opportunity, and that's what made him an outlier. So after the 10,000 hour chapters, the next few chapters go into geniuses, which I found super interesting. Again, I just loved part one. I'm not gonna go into too much detail, but honestly, there's some really, really smart people in the world, but what they found from studies was that it just completely depends on essentially your socioeconomic status. So they found that middle and upper class kids, their parents challenge them to challenge. So don't just accept this for an answer. Ask me why, challenge, and learn from that. Stand up for yourself when you're going to the doctor. Tell them what hurts. Tell them that you need help. Whereas a lot of lower class kids, they just accept the rules for what they are. They're told not to question. They shut up and listen. And they're not told to like necessarily stand up for themselves to superiors, where more upper and middle class kids are. And essentially that ends up being the make it or break it for two men in the story that are both very, very high IQ levels. One, you know, he has his PhD and he's working on all this amazing research. The other guy, very, very smart, also writing insane scientific papers, but he doesn't have a college degree. And that is because circumstances in which he didn't stick up for himself. And I just thought that was a really good chapter, especially if you were about to have kids or you have kids. It just shows them to like empower themselves, and you know, you learn that from a young age. And so I thought that was very useful if you want to teach your kids that and just to know that. So part two of the book is called Legacy, and I didn't think it was as interesting as part one, but I still thought it was pretty interesting, and I'll tell you a couple of my favorite parts. Part two, Legacy, is about culture. So honestly, not even where you grew up, but where your ancestors grew up and how that affected you. Some other things that go along with familial life and culturally and things like that. So a couple notable things in this part was they talked about airline crashes and why they happen, and a big part to why they found that they happen was because all over the world, people have different cultures, obviously, and they have different levels of authority. So in Korean, for example, they have 4 different styles of their language. That's not correct, but bear with me here on like level of authority if you would talk to somebody. And what they found was like these co-pilots, the pilot was such an authority to them that they weren't saying, hey, like, I don't agree with your landing plan, and hey, like, there is weather, I think you need to double check this. They weren't, culturally, it was disrespectful to stand up to them. And so they found there was a lot more crashes in Korean airline, which ended up being completely changed by somebody that came in and like changed their dynamics. But I think the last thing I'll talk about, there was this chapter on called rice paddies and math. Obviously they're talking about Eastern cultures and Asia, and mostly like China, Korea, and Hong Kong, Taiwan. And by working in rice fields, which if you don't know is tireless work, it has to be such exact to get the crop perfect, and you can have multiple crops a year. It's not like corn or beans where you do it once for the year and it's done. The people that grow up in these cultures that have these rice paddies, they see the dedication and hard work it takes to run these rice paddies, that they are immediately instilled with this cultural like work hard. And that's like kind of part one of that story. And part two is why there's a stereotype that Asians are good at math. In some of these Asian cultures, what I just mentioned, their language allows them to learn math very easily. It's very clear and the numbers stay the same throughout the whole counting process. And so when it comes to math, it's very straightforward. It's just like more linguistically simple than English is. These kids in Asia, they learn math at a young age and they like it because it's easy, it's simple, it makes sense to them. And so they want to study it more. And so they're already so much more advanced by the time they get to second grade, let's say, than people in more Western cultures. We're just like already kind of behind them. So that's how this like stereotype developed. And so not only were they good at it and they liked it and it made sense, so they continued to study it, but also they have this work from this rice paddy that they just put in the work, the hard work, day after day, tirelessly, and they just have this insane work ethic that's actually, they could tell what countries people were from, just how long you would take the time to fill out a survey. They could tell how well you place in math. Yeah, I just thought that was kind of cool to give some explanation on like kind of how the stereotype came about. Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, I would suggest, and I probably would read again. I really liked that first part, and the second part was pretty interesting. The next book I'm actually gonna review, The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. So yeah, that's it. Let me know what you thought of the book review. If you can comment below, if you have any suggestions, good or bad, I'm ready to hear them all. But again, they're not always gonna be like this. I just had a lot to say about this book, and this will be the next book. So I hope you tune in, and I hope you want to read these books and pass them along, and we can start this cool ass book chain. So if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel if you like book reviews and finance stuff. Hit the like button if you want more people to see this video, and otherwise subscribe and just have yourself a wonderful day. See you later.